Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Code and the Code Encoders Who Code It. I'm your host, Drew Bragg, and today I'm joined by Ernesto Tagwerker from FastRuby.io and also from my home city, Philadelphia. Ernesto, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, Drew. Happy to be here. And my name is Ernesto Tagwerker, and I guess my pronouns are he, him. And I'm the founder and CTO of FastRuby.io and Umble Labs. And when I'm not working on code, I like to spend time with my kids, my wife, and to enjoy the wonderful city of Philadelphia.
Awesome. So, for those of you who are new to the show, I'm going to ask Ernesto three questions. I'm going to ask him what he's working on, if he has any blockers, and if he doesn't, what blockers did he recently have and how did he solve them? And then I'm going to give him an opportunity to wrap up the show by just sharing anything cool, new, or interesting that he's built or learned. Doesn't even have to be coding related. So, Ernesto, with that being said, what have you been working on?
Oh man, so many things. I actually just got back from my vacation. I took 4 weeks off, so I'm still trying
Oh,
to think about what was I doing before I took off. So one thing that we've been working on at FastRuby.io is a new audit offer. Basically, it's a performance audit for anybody who's running a Ruby or Rails application. And I want to say a few months ago, we partnered with Nate Berkopek, who is kind of like the Rails performance guy.
yeah.
If you don't know him, please go and read all the things he's written in the past. But anyway, Nate and I have been friends since a couple conferences ago. And we wanted to start offering this new audit to the Rails ecosystem and talked to him, and we said, let's do Tune, which is basically one service he was doing many, many years ago. And then he stopped doing it. And I thought it was like a really cool idea to get a sense of how your application is doing in terms of performance. So right now we are working with a couple clients, working on a couple reports for them. And I guess I'm trying to get the word out that this is out there and it's available and people can just come to us and we can work on something like that for them and help them have a more performant application out there. Another thing that I'm working on, I guess, is some open source projects. I'm a maintainer and contributor to a few Ruby code quality tools like Ruby Critic and Skunk. And one of the things that I want to do before the end of the year is release version 1.0 of Skunk and answer a few repeat questions that I've had about that library. So those, I think, are like my two priorities for the next 3 months or so.
That's awesome. That's a lot to unpack, too. So, for Tune, I know you guys have prerequisites for doing an upgrade, right? You have to have test coverage, you have to have things so that you guys know you're coming into an application you actually can upgrade. What are the prerequisites for something like Tune?
Yeah, for Tune, it's actually a lot easier. There is really not that much in terms of prerequisites. We need to get access to your source code. So I guess there needs to be like some NDA signed for us to
Yeah.
look at like private information. And we need to get access to your APM. So if you're running Scout or New Relic or Skylight, we're going to need access to those services. So I guess if you're not running an APM, there will be like an initial step to say, okay, hey, we need to install this. It needs to run for at least a week. And then we can get to work. We get to look at your source code, look at your infrastructure, look at the New Relic data or APM data. And usually it's pretty quickly, like in about a week, we'll come up with a report. And then, you can either decide to work with us on making the changes or you can do the changes yourself. So compared to the Rails upgrade service that we offer, it's a lot less in terms of prerequisites. And just to make it clear for anybody who's never heard about FastRuby.io, it's productized service to do Rails upgrades for companies that struggle to do them. And one of the prerequisites is that their test suite is, pretty solid. So I would say like 70% or more in terms of code coverage. We have worked with clients that have like 50% or more. The problem with that is, manual QA takes time, and if you add the human factor to a already long project, is only going to make it longer. So yeah, we just rely so heavily on the test suite that we need applications to have like a really good test suite, so we don't have to go manually testing like 50% of your
Yeah.
application. But it is quite a big requirement. I know like some applications or some teams that struggle with technical debt also struggle with keeping up with their test suite and making sure that the test suite is getting better in every sprint.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, it's test coverage is important and hopefully everyone's floating around that magic number, but if you're not there, getting there can be tough. So when you get access to an APM, what are like the first metrics you look at, like the most important metrics?
Yeah, so I think the request queuing time is one of the key ones that we look at. How much time does a request sit there waiting for a process to become available to process it? So sometimes, when it's higher than 50 milliseconds, that's usually like a sign that we could improve it. We could set up your Kubernetes cluster to have more, you know, passenger processes to process it. But yeah, I think that's usually one of them. Page load time is another one, and yeah, it usually depends on the application. Sometimes, it depends on whether it's like using a lot of JavaScript, so the JavaScript is taking forever to load, or sometimes it's something more specific, like maybe your application code needs to be improved. But we try to go from like more generic to more specific when we work on a tune report.
Okay. And actually, you sort of answered my next question was, how much front end stuff do you touch as far as performance goes? So it sounds like you do touch it at least a little bit. How much are you looking for? All right, we have massive amounts of style sheets and JavaScript going over the wire, and that's slowing down stuff, or we're not caching things correctly on the front end. Or is it more of just yeah, no, we're mostly looking at your interactions with database, your interactions through rack and things like that?
Yeah, I would say it's more Ruby and Rails specific than
Yeah.
JavaScript specific. Like we might look at, yeah, caching and seeing like how much of the JavaScript that you're using is being cached, whether, you're using Webpack or something else, whether you're using a CDN or not. Ideally, we will recommend like to start using a CDN for all the packs or all the chunks that need to be cached, but we are not going to go and dive very deep inside like your JavaScript code. That is something else. One thing, another thing that's kind of coming down the pipeline for us is a productized service for JavaScript upgrades, more
Okay.
like Node.js upgrades. But we are not thinking, we're not planning to launch any like JavaScript performance optimization services anytime soon, maybe in the next 5 years or so. But for now, it's just Ruby, Rails, and infrastructure heavy when we work on the tune report.
Sure. And how much? So you have your Ruby bits or your Rails bits, you have your database bits. How much does the infrastructure play in what your tune report looks like? Like you had mentioned, we may suggest doing something with Kubernetes. If you're not on Kubernetes, how like does that change a lot of what you look at or look for, or is it pretty much like if you're using Kubernetes, we're going to go this route. If you're not and you're doing this instead, we'll tweak it slightly, but it's the same generic like this is what we look for on the infrastructure side.
Yeah, we look at the infrastructure, and depending on what they use, we might tweak our recommendations. Like if you're using Heroku, we might recommend use the autoscaler plugin that I forget who built it. I want to say it's his name is Adam, but instead of using like Heroku's native autoscale performance dynos, we would probably recommend like, hey, use this plugin that someone is, I think it's called Rails Autoscale or
Yeah. I know
We'll
what
have
you're
to Google
talking
that
about at least.
later.
Yeah.
But yeah. But anyway, use that tool if you're not using it. If you're using it, then okay, great. Then we check that item off the list and we continue down with like another item. And
Awesome.
we make our recommendations based on what you currently have. Some people think that you need to move off Heroku and like start using, Kubernetes or Google Cloud or whatever. In the past, I participated in those migration projects, and sometimes it costs so much to actually do it that I don't know if it's like the best way. So,
Hmm.
what we usually try to do is to make things work and scale with what you have. And if we notice, like, okay, you maxed out all the things that we recommended, then it's like, okay, maybe it is time to move away from Heroku and start using, Google Cloud or AWS. But usually, Heroku, we love Heroku. We use it a lot. We use it for our internal tools. And yeah, I'm 199% sure that you can tweak Heroku to go way faster with our recommendations.
Okay. And then, so once you have a tune report, is it fairly easy for if a team does have the capacity to say, okay, engineer, you're going to go off and take care of this checkbox item, other engineer, you're going to go do this. Is it pretty easy for a team to take your report and do it themselves if they wanted to, or is it maybe split where it's like some of these things you could do yourself, but you probably want to hire our team to take care of the more complex items, or do you just distill it down enough for them?
Yeah, I think their recommendations are good enough and clear enough that a team could just take it and run with it. Um, and if it's not super clear, I'm sure we can point them to the right documentation for them to
Right.
like go and follow the steps. Um, I think it works well when you take the recommendations, you implement them, and 6 months ahead, 6 months go by, and we come in and we do the same report and we tell you, awesome, you implemented all these things. It looks much better now. The average request time is way lower. It doesn't fluctuate with all the, peak times and stuff. And we basically come in and say like, yeah, you're all good. You just keep doing what you're doing, and maybe in a year we'll talk again and see if
Okay.
performance has degraded over time. But I think it works very well when you do it recurrently and you keep it as like one of your business goals to keep performance in check and you don't let it slip over time. So yeah, either way, I think we're happy to implement for our clients or have them do it themselves. I think it's in everybody's best interest to learn a little bit more about performance and some
Yeah.
of these key concepts that Nate has been talking about for years.
Do you have any recommendations for listeners in general or people who are using the Tune Report of resources to go to learn more about Ruby and Rails application performance?
Yeah, I really like the complete guide to Rails performance. It's not free, but in the grand scheme of things,
Yeah.
if you're a manager, just go buy it to for your engineering team. If you are just trying to learn more about Rails performance, it's not that big of an investment to just buy it. It's basically Nate's book. You can read it and you can apply it like the next week when you finish reading the book. The other thing that's super interesting, I don't know if you're there, but its Slack team is super interesting. I think if you buy the book plus I don't know how he has it set up right now, but I remember back in the day, it was like, yeah, just pay a little more to get access to the Slack community for the book. I joined it about 3 years ago, and it's been super helpful just to see case studies. People will share like, oh yeah, I made this tweak and then I see this performance change. I started using JE Malloc with Sidekick, and they show the difference between like the performance like before and after, and you're like, oh shoot, like this is something that I could just go and implement with a new build pack in Heroku, and it would look like this for my application too. So anyway, yeah, just having like a Slack community and the book are very, very important for anybody who's interested in performance. So that would be like my recommendation.
Yeah, I have the book. It's fantastic, and I'm in the Slack channel. Definitely a lurker, not posting anything, but I agree. Both things are awesome and a wealth of knowledge. Is there a minimum Rails version that you want people to be on for Tune, or is it like, yeah, if you are on 4.2, we're going to recommend we do an upgrade for you, but we'll also do a Tune for you?
Not really. No, that the version is not an issue. Of
Okay.
course, yeah, we'll recommend like if they're on Rails 2, 3, hey, you should
Yeah.
probably
Oh,
upgrade
jeez.
to Rails 7, or you should start using Rails LTS. Some people are running really old versions in production and they don't even use the Rails LTS product. So yeah, upgrade. We're happy to help, but if you
Yeah.
don't want to do it, we'll still do a tune report for you.
Okay. That's awesome. Changing gears slightly to a slightly more upgrade oriented topic. So, your Fast Ruby's basic business is coming in and doing Rails upgrades for companies, but you guys also have a wealth of knowledge on doing upgrades in the form of your ebook and the blog and conference workshops and everything. It's so how do you find it to balance out where your company's main product is performing this upgrade, but you simultaneously are in many ways for free teaching people how to do the thing your company gets paid to do? How does that end up
Mhm.
working out? Like, how do you strike the balance there? Is it just you're banking on engineering teams not having the time to do the upgrade themselves, or like what's I appreciate I've used Fast Ruby's blog like crazy, and every upgrade I've done, and the ebook's awesome, but just curious how that works in the business model.
Yeah, oh, that's a great question. I love it, and I yeah, I have to be honest, and transparent. Like doing an upgrade with us, it is very expensive, and usually there are only a few countries in the world that can afford our services. And our projects start at $50,000. So I know that there are many teams in all over the world that cannot afford our services. So that's why we're happy to share the complete guide to upgrade Rails. That's the ebook. We share some tips in our newsletter too, and we try to do, the classic formula of sharing our recipes. Because if you have the time and you just need someone to guide you in the upgrade, great, you can do it yourself. You grab our guides, you grab our advice and techniques, and you just go and you do it yourself. Um, I'm from Argentina, and it is a little sad to say that no company from Argentina could hire us to do the upgrade for them because it would be super expensive. And the good news is like with all the formulas and all the content that we put out, someone could just grab that and do the upgrade themselves. They can set up dual booting and gradually start doing it themselves. So I think the way that it works is like if you don't have the time and you have the budget to do the upgrade with us, you reach out to us, we talk, and we do the upgrade for you. No problem. But if you don't have the budget, then maybe you have the time to do the upgrade yourself. And at the end of the day, we want people to grab our techniques or grab our ideas and go and implement themselves. Like the whole thing about the dual booting technique is like it's something that we do, but also like other companies that do upgrades do. And it's in my to-do list is like just submit a pull request for the Rails guides to explain how the technique works and the tools that people could use. And it's been in my to-do list for I want to say like 4 years. But at some point I want to take the time to submit the pull request and say, here, upgrading Rails, how do you do it? Okay, set up dual booting. Cool, how do I do that? Well, you can use two gems or more probably. There's Next Rails, which we currently maintain, and then there is Boot Boot that does basically the same thing but with a different way. So if you go to the guides in the near future, I would like people to just see upgrading should be easy, but if it's not easy, you should set up dual booting. And you can use this to set up your CI to run two jobs. And you can set this up in your development environment to quickly debug between versions because you will find weird behaviors with callbacks from Rails between versions. So dual booting will help you with that. Um, and I think, I don't know if that answers your questions, but the more we share our recipes, the better they get. And the better they get, the easier it gets for us to upgrade our clients' applications too. So
Right.
it's kind of like a virtuous cycle, I guess.
Right. No, I agree with everything you just said. Teaching people how to do something like that, that ends up being extremely helpful for the whole ecosystem. And I will say though, even though 50,000 sounds like a lot of money, I mean, there are teams out there doing internal app upgrades of 2 or 3 developers working on a year to get an app upgraded. So like when you look at it that way, like how much are you paying that team of developers who are now not working on feature requests and are just doing the upgrade versus 50,000? I mean, even a little bit more than that. For a
Mm-hmm.
lot of companies, it may end up breaking out a little bit more in your favor. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of upgrades, and they are time consuming, especially if the app is large and old. Still
Yeah,
hunting.
and these days those are the applications that we are working on. Like we're talking about
Right.
like huge monoliths that have been around for 10 plus years. There is a surprising amount of public companies out there that are running these Rails applications that are really old in production. And I can't really name names, but there are so many out there. And I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, this is shocking. And I'm glad that we picked this niche that is so big. Like when we started working on it, we were working with a client, and then we thought, oh, we could package this up in a nice way that it's a productized service.
Right.
And then it just blew up. Like we've been growing so much over the past 3 years. Like we went from being a team of 6 to a team of 30 in 2 years. And we're just, yeah, we're excited about the technical debt space. And this is another topic that I'd love to talk to you about. It's like gradually we started becoming maintainers of Ruby code quality tools and
Yeah.
gems that it feels like the code quality niche in the Ruby world was cool at some time, but then it was abandoned. And then it's like, okay, fastruby.io came in and we slowly became maintainers of like a few gems that have been really cool and useful for many years, but now people are like not using them, or maybe they're just using Code Climate. I don't know. I'm just wondering
Right.
what you think about that.
I personally love Ruby Critic. I think it's great. I run it on apps that I'm getting familiar with. I've run it on apps in the past. I've run it on my current company's app, and I won't share any scores because it's an old big app. But no, it's awesome. But probably a lot of people using Code Climate just because it just integrates with GitHub, and anytime there's a pull request, it just runs everything for you, and there's no real major setup. So one less thing for an engineering team to do. But I mean, I personally love Ruby Critic, and for a while when we were using Jenkins build servers, I think we had it set up to automatically update our like Ruby Critic output, our HTML output. We don't have anything now that we've moved to GitHub Actions set up yet, just because we don't have anyone to do it yet. But eventually. But I like the gem quite a bit, so I hope that it sticks around. And thank you for maintaining it.
Yeah, and I'm just thankful for whoever wrote it in the first place. Like when I found it, I started using it and I was just interested in this concept of like churn versus complexity.
Mm-hmm.
Like Michael Feathers, Sandy Metz have written about this topic, and I thought it was just fascinating to see like, oh, that's how you find like the most tortured code, you know, quote marks there. Uh,
Yeah.
but and then I thought, well, that is really cool, but at the same time, like you said about like the test suite and the pre-requirements and stuff, it's like we use test coverage and code coverage as well. So how can we like combine like churn and code complexity and test coverage all in one place? And that's how I created this gem called Skunk, which is basically extending Ruby Critic in a way to say, awesome, there's churn, there's complexity, but now there's also code coverage and test suite. And are your most complex or your most costly files covered by tests? And anyway, that's if anybody's interested in the relationship between like all those three dimensions, they can go and check out Skunk and see how they can use it. Um, the biggest question that I'm trying to answer now is like, what is a good skunk score?
Mhm.
And I think that's the main question I want to answer with version 1.0 is saying, let's use the grading system that goes from A to F, like Ruby Critic, like Code Climate. Skunk should do something like that so that people know like, okay, what is a good skunk score? Well, this file is an A or this file is an F. And it's an F because, this file keeps changing, complexity is terrible, and there are no tests. So
Yeah,
that's
that
an
sounds
F.
like an F. Yep, that sounds
Yeah.
like an F to me.
But anyway, right now, if you run Skunk on your application or library, you'll see a number that doesn't mean much. It could be like 0.1 or it could be like 100.7. And you're like, what do I do with this? So anyway, I apologize for that. But
No.
it is a version 0.5 right now. So
Mm.
give me a break, please. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a awesome goal though, and an awesome library because I think those things, it's really easy to lose sight of how those three things kind of go hand in hand and how much your code can improve when you're paying attention to those things, especially high churn files that end up being complex that don't have good test coverage. That is a black hole of danger. Like you have no backstop to touch that file. And that's a scary thing. So I think the goals you have set forth for Skunk are awesome. So that sort of sounds like a blocker that you're kind of trying to figure out that grading system. But do you have any other blockers or any blockers that you recently had that you solved and want to share? I mean, you're working on a lot of cool stuff, so I'm sure you've run into some interesting blockers.
Well, yeah, I think you touched a really good point there. Like my main blocker is like I don't have time these days.
Yeah.
And I'm not working that much on clients applications. I mean, the Tune report is one way that I'm gonna be more involved in like clients applications. But when it comes to the upgrades these days, I'm not working on any client projects because I can add the most value when I'm kind of switching between projects and helping with specific problems to unblock my team. But I think my main blocker is that these days, like I want to release a Skunk version 1.0. That means that in order to figure out like what the grading system is going to be, I need to be in the weeds, like improving technical debt or investing in technical debt for like libraries or application code. Um, and I just don't have the time these days to go and be like, okay, this file looks like an F. If I switch it slightly, does it become a D or a C or whatever? Um, and I think like that's my main blocker. I just want to touch the code to learn from real life experiences to improve the grade for this file. So anyway, if you have like some real life Rails applications that you think are messy and open source, those would be like a good starting point for me. We have one that's called Points, and we use it to estimate our upgrade projects. and I've definitely run skunk there, and I can see it goes from 0 to 100 for like the worst to the best. Um, but anyway, it'd be interesting to look at other applications that I'm not that familiar with to try to improve it and improve the skunk score for like the worst files in the project.
Right. Right. All right. Well, call out to all the listeners if you've got a project for Ernesto to look at. Definitely hit him up, and he'll come in and tell you how terrible your codes are,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
and help you improve it. So this, I mean, it almost feels like I don't even need to ask the last question, because the last question is like, share something new or cool or interesting. And that's all you've been talking about is cool and new and interesting stuff that you've got going on. But is there anything else that you wanted to add? And it doesn't have to be coding related. I mean, 4 weeks of vacation, what'd you do there?
Yeah,
I'm super jealous, by the way, because 4 weeks of vacation sounds amazing.
yes. Well, okay, to make it sound less awesome, I was 2.5 weeks of those was with my kids traveling to Spain and back. So if you know, I mean, if you're a parent, you know that traveling with kids is not really super
Right.
relaxing. It's more like you're basically a butler to your kids, and your kids are demanding things all the time. And anyway,
Correct.
it was
Yep.
2.5 weeks of being with my kids and enjoying them for sure, but also working a lot as a co-parent with my
Mm.
wife. Uh, and the last week of my 4 week vacation was just like me fixing stuff around the house, which is it was good, but I just moved to a new house that is like 100 years old. So I was fixing like the technical debt off the house if you think about it. So yeah, being an owner to a house is challenging, interesting, and I don't know. I'm only now, like after 2 months of like moving in, I'm finally enjoying my new house,
That's
my new
awesome.
old house. But no, I think in terms of like cool and interesting things, I don't know. I feel like I'd love to talk about this. One thing that we try to do at the company is to hire junior developers that are
Awesome.
also remote developers. And I think like we talked about this in a previous conference, just you and I, about like the challenge that we as remote companies, and just for context, we've been remote even before COVID. Like before COVID, we were remote, and it was always like a scary thing to hire a junior developer and train them remotely and like find the time and the resources to be there for them so that they can become, software engineers and then senior and all that. So I don't know. I guess like that's something that I would love to talk to you about and see how you guys are doing. I'm not sure if you have junior engineers that are remote right now, but that's something that we do, and we try to do one junior engineer at a time. And once they move on to the next level, we open up the position again. And the three junior engineers that have been with us have been great. And they are now, two are software engineers, and there's a third one that's a junior engineer. Um, but anyway, I'm just wondering if you've had to deal with that, and what are things that have worked for you guys and within three.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely deal with the remote challenges, but and there's a few of us, few of the more senior engineers on the team have been like kind of brainstorming and thinking about how we can make a better push to bring in junior engineers and not just be looking for someone who's more mid or senior and has experience coming in, but we're not at a spot where we have the time and resources to devote. Like I feel like we'd be doing them a disservice currently. Um, Hopefully that'll change soon. I know that I've heard a lot about this topic recently in the Ruby community, which is awesome. Like there's definitely a huge push for being better at mentoring juniors, hiring juniors, getting juniors up to the level where fine, if you're a company that is only hiring mids, like the community has done the work to get this person up. Um, like Andy Kroll has the first Ruby Friends going on where you're going to get a mentor and a mentee paired together. And there's a couple of other companies that are doing a good push. Andrew Mason and Julie just started the Ruby for All podcast that's specifically targeted to juniors, which is great. And is also an awesome podcast. If you haven't listened, definitely go listen. It's just a good podcast, even if you're not a junior. The one thing, and again, we're not hiring juniors, so take it with a grain of salt. The one thing that I've found that I think is extremely helpful when bringing people into a new role, especially a new role, a new code base, a new company, especially if they haven't worked remotely before, is actually hiring more than one at a time. That way they start together and they have a buddy that they can kind of go to and be like, hey, I'm working on getting my head wrapped around this part of the code base. And have you gotten a chance to like touch it yet? Do you understand it? Like, hey, can we pair on this and it's another junior, or it's another person who is equally as lost as you. Hopefully, no one's being that lost, but there's always that degree of like, I am overwhelmed. This is a 13-year-old code base and it's way bigger than anything I've ever touched before. And I feel a little overwhelmed, and my mentor at my company is great, but I need someone who speaks my language. Having that other, hey, you started the day before me or the day after me or the same day as me, like you are in the shit like I am. I think that helps. I've noticed it in when we're hiring people. I feel like the people who come in as a group end up doing better than, or not better, just have an easier transition time than if they came in solo and just were like, you would think it's the opposite because it's like, oh, if you come in solo, you get all that like one-on-one dedicated time. But I think it actually works out more like if you come in pairs or groups, you still get all that one-on-one time plus a buddy. And I think that buddy system helps out so much. So yeah, I don't know how much that helps you because we're not in the position that you're in where we're bringing in juniors, but there are a lot of people out there. So if you're listening to this and you are actively hiring juniors or actively involved in helping level up juniors, please reach out to me and Ernesto and give us your thoughts, because it's something that myself, one of the other seniors on the team, and a few of our ETLs have been very like, hey, we want to bring in juniors because there's a lot of them and they're awesome people and have the potential to be amazing engineers. We just don't have, I don't know if we don't have the time or the resources, or if we just don't understand exactly what they need enough to understand what kind of time and resources we need to dedicate them to. So that's where we are.
No, and that's a great point. Like, I think to consider, like, do you have the infrastructure to set up or to onboard a junior developer and set them up for success, right? I feel like over the years, we are a consulting shop, so we are constantly looking for talent to hire. And yeah, it's the buddy system is one of the things that I would say works very well. Like, we don't hire two junior engineers at a time, but when we do hire one, and we hire one at a time, and when we do, we set them up with an onboarding buddy and someone that they can reach out to that will be able to answer any questions that they have, even if they're like totally lost. Another thing that we do at Umbu Labs is we like to have a bench of senior engineers that are available to pair with the juniors. Granted, right now we're still pretty small, so there's one person on the bench that can do that and pair with the junior engineers when they need to. But anyway, that's something else that helps. Like, if you're gonna have one or more junior engineers, like, have senior people who are available, and like the message is clear, like, hey, this person is available and they're not assigned to any client projects, because by design we save them up to pair with other engineers. Can be senior or can be junior. So if anybody needs help, at Umbu Labs, what we do is like we have the pair channel, and anybody can be like, "Hey, I'm available to pair now if anybody needs help," or "Hey, I'm stuck in this problem. Can anybody pair with me right now?" And there's usually one person that will have the time to do that. But yeah, I think like we've learned a lot over the past few years, but we're still trying to get better. So by no means I mean that we're awesome at onboarding and, training junior engineers, but I like the challenge and I like the idea of always having one junior engineer to push us to be better for them and to be a better team to support them.
Yeah, I really dig that idea of having that bench. And it's almost like I am the pairing on call person. Like I'm not working on anything but being available to pair. I think that's an awesome idea. I think that would be really helpful, especially when bringing on juniors. Is like, hey, you're not going to bother this person. You're not interrupting their work. You're not taking them away from some client deadline thing that they have. Their whole job right now is to help you. So pair with them. I think pairing's awesome at all levels. So, you know, always
Yeah.
having someone to pair is amazing. But for juniors, at least I remember when I was a junior, like being like, I don't want to bother anybody. I don't want to like come in and be like, hey, I have so many dumb questions and you're so busy, but could you like spare 5 minutes? Like I hated doing that. And now that I'm, the staff engineer at my company, like I'm like, oh, please don't ever feel like that. Like, please interrupt me and take me away from this crap that I'm doing. I would rather pair with you and help you level up. I get so much more joy out of that than releasing something. And I think at least a lot of our ETLs are the same way. Like, no, you're never a bother. You should ping us all the time. But I think having it set up, like you're describing, where it's like that bench, that on call setup, it's like it takes any internal pressure away from like, nah, I'm gonna bother this person. You're really not. Like this is what they're dedicated to right now is pairing with you. So I think I might pitch that idea at work. I'm stealing it, Ernesto. Thank you.
Yes, please take this idea, steal it. In any company, I think it's a good idea to have a bench or either staff engineers or senior engineers that also have the right personality. Sometimes you want people who are very helpful, very open, very ready to jump in and try to understand where things are, where the code is. Even if they don't know anything about the project, we just have this really great staff engineer in our bench right now that he's always happy to help and jump in. And even if he doesn't know the code, he can pair with the junior or the senior engineer and share their mental process, because sometimes it's all about that. It's like about, oh, wow, yeah, I have no idea what this library does, but I see what you're trying to do, and I see that the library should be doing that, but it's not. So let's figure it out together. Sometimes engineers, even with all the experience in the world, are not that great at helping other engineers. So that's one thing that I would recommend for anybody who wants to make the jump from like senior to staff, at least in our company, is to not just work on your technical skills, but also in your communication, coaching, and teaching skills, so you can help other engineers like be comfortable with you.
Yeah.
And one last thing I want to say about this thing is like it is so normal what you said, like this whole thing of like being junior or being like less experienced and being like, oh, I don't want to bother people with my questions. And you're really not bothering people, or you want to be in a company where that feeling is not a problem. You want to
Yeah.
be okay asking questions, and even if you think that it's a silly question, we have a learning channel in our Slack account, and anybody can just go there and post like something that they're learning or something that they need to learn, and ask for advice there. um, and if you're a senior or at a staff level or CTO level, what I would recommend is like to be as vulnerable as possible in open Slack channels, and being like, hey, I'm trying to figure this out. I have no idea what this library does. And maybe start like a Slack message that becomes a thread and where you kind of like go sharing and asking for advice, asking for questions. I think the worst thing you can do as a senior person is to just DM other people and not share your struggles with the rest of the company because you can be the most senior person and you're still going to struggle to find the answer for a complicated problem. So anyway, just be vulnerable and share your process in public channels. I would
Yeah, I
highly
agree.
recommend that.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you just said. It's very helpful when others can see, like, oh, you're this level, but you still struggle, or you still have questions, or you still want someone to pair with you and and get help on questions and help uh, get others to get you unstuck. And I think for anyone who's like, oh, I can't pair with this person because they're more senior than I am and I'm only a junior or a mid, like I can't bring anything to the table. That's also completely untrue. Like the amount of times that I've been like, I got to pair with someone on this and just catching them up to speed on the problem I'm working on and saying it out loud and trying to explain it to someone, I'm like, oh, I freaking figured it out. I got it. Yep, sorry for I'm good now. It was just the rubber duck phenomenon that I needed was just another person here to say like, well, what's that doing? And then I explain it and I go, I figured it out. Got it. So you can be a mentor at any level. Like sometimes the person only needs just another set of eyeballs, especially if they've been working on something for a while. So, all good stuff. Definitely. I love how much I've seen in the Ruby community getting juniors leveled up. Like, it felt like we were all talking about it for a while, where it was like, yeah, we need to do something. We need to do something. And then all of a sudden it was like, yeah, we're going to do something. Like, we have the mentorship project coming out. Your company does juniors. Other companies are starting to do juniors. We're working on it. At my company, like, we are hiring and we're really trying to work hard on setting up a system where we can hire juniors. We can we can do a really competent junior right now who's like capable of doing stuff on their own, but we want to set it up that we can almost take like a boot camp grad and bring them in and get them up to speed. And it's a lot of work, but I think it's really worth it. And I love seeing how much the community as a whole, not just companies, but as a whole, is like opening up resources. We've got new podcasts, mentor program, everything coming out. And I think that is a huge thing for the community and our future. So I'm super pumped to see it.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that Julie and Andrew started a podcast about
Yeah,
this topic in particular. And I think if we want to bring more people to the community, this needs to be even better. Like we need
absolutely.
to have more resources and make it easier for people to get into the community.
Yep, I completely agree. Well, we are coming up on time. I know that you are a very busy man, so I do not want to take up too much more of your time. But is there anything else that you wanted to talk about before we start wrapping up?
No, I think if anybody's interested in any of the Ruby gems that I brought up in the episode, you can just go to github.com/fastruby and you'll see a bunch of code quality gems in there. I think the easiest way to help us with a contribution is to, pick the one that you like the most, try to set up the project locally, and see if the test suite runs. That'd be like a quick and easy way to make a
Sure.
contribution and say like, yeah, you missed this in the README or something.
Right.
Um, if you want to help with Skunk and kind of explore the relationship between churn, complexity, and code coverage, just go and run Skunk in one of your Rails apps or one of your Ruby gems. That'd be super helpful to report back if it worked, if it didn't work. Anyway, I would like to know if you're interested in working in technical debt projects. We are always looking for talented developers. Right now, the junior engineer position is taken, but if you follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter, we will let you know when we open up the position once again, hopefully before the end of the year. And yeah, if you're struggling with performance in your Rails application or Ruby application, feel free to check out fastruby.io/tune. That's our audit for performance optimization. And Yeah, if you if anything that I talked about here is interesting, feel free to follow me on Twitter. I'm at eTagwerker there, and I usually complain about stuff. Sometimes it's about code, sometimes it's about flying, and sometimes it's about meeting up randomly Drew in the airport
Yeah.
because I
Yep.
had to switch flights midway to Philly. Um,
Yeah.
we'll
Go
talk
direct,
about
man.
that some other day. There's no
Yeah.
direct
No.
flight between Portland and Philly, we
Yeah,
learned. Okay.
found that out the hard way. Actually, so you took my wrap up question. I was going to ask where people can find you on the internet. You got that covered. Everything that you just said we'll have in the show notes. So one last thing before we wrap, will I see you at RubyConf either in Houston or in Rhode Island?
I think if I go to any of those events, I think it's gonna be the RubyConf mini,
Okay,
because of political
sure.
issues.
Yep. And that's the
So
whole point of Mini. So,
yeah, and I really like Gemma, who I know is involved in RubyConf mini.
yep.
And also, yeah, to be honest, like I prefer smaller conferences other than big conferences. So yeah, I'm thinking about submitting a talk for a RubyConf mini. I don't know if I still have time, but hopefully
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
have the time. But even if I don't get accepted, I'm probably gonna be there at RubyConf mini. What about you? Which one are you planning to go to?
So I am definitely going to Mini. I'm submitting a talk also. If for what it's worth, it's only a 4 hour train ride. So, no planes to get to RubyConf Mini. So, thank you again, Ernesto, for coming on the show. It was awesome to get to talk to you. It's funny that you live in the same basic area as me, and I see you less than I see people who live states away. But it was awesome that you came on the show. I'm glad we got to talk.
Yeah, it was great to be here, and I think we should definitely make plans to hang out in real life in Philly, which I don't think
Yeah.
it's ever happened. Like we hang out in
No.
Vegas and Portland, but
Yeah.
never in
We've seen each
Philly.
other a lot, just never in Philly. Well, hopefully we'll get maybe a Philly RB in person soon. Uh,
Yes.
we do have people coming from other countries to Philly RB now, so maybe not, because I think half of the people that are showing up to Philly RB are not actually in Philly, but
Yeah.
there's at least four of us in Philly, so
Yeah,
maybe.
I forgot to mention that in the episode, so here it is. I'm also the organizer of Philly RB. So if you're in the Philly area and want to meet up, come to the next one. Hopefully in September, we'll have a meetup. But and if you're interested in speaking at Philly RB either remotely or on site, feel free to DM me on Twitter and we'll figure something out.
Yeah, and right now it's not in person, it's all virtual. So you don't actually even need to be in Philly. We have a couple of other
Yeah.
countries and cities being represented, so feel free to drop by and just hang out with other Rubyists. So hope to see everyone there and I hope to see you too. It will be, I think, a week after this episode airs will be the next one. So people will have a little bit of time to jump on, but I will include the link to sign up
Yes.
in the show notes too. So awesome, man. Well, thanks again for coming on. This was great. We'll do it again soon. And I'll see you at Philly RB.
See you there. Thank
All
you.
right. See you, man.